Egypt, land of the pharaohs, full of ancient wonders. If you ask anyone who's been to Egypt what captivated them about the country, they might say the magnificent pyramids of Giza. Maybe the Valley of the Kings, full of mysterious tombs and treasures. Perhaps the 3,000-year-old temples with their beautiful statues, artworks and hieroglyphics. But for me, it was none of those things. It was this disused railway. Hi guys, welcome to Little Wicket Railway. I'm Rob, and I might possibly be the only person who finds the subject of this video interesting. Let me explain. Earlier this month, I was on holiday in Egypt, just south of Hurghada, close to a town called Safaga on the Red Sea coast. The hotel we were in was pretty isolated, with sea on one side and the Eastern Sahara Desert on the other side. On the way to our accommodation, I'd spotted what looked to me like a railway line, and it ran within a stone's throw of the hotel, and being a railway enthusiast, this piqued my interest. So whilst most people would spend their holiday enjoying all the tourist attractions that Egypt has to offer, my brain couldn't let go of this mysterious railway that was just outside the hotel. I could see from Google Maps that it looked to run from the port of Safaga down the coast before heading into the desert, but finding any other information about it on the internet was proving very difficult. So much to my wife's embarrassment, I started asking the hotel staff for information. This involved me delivering my best choo-choo train impression and saying the word railway, often not a word they'd come across before, and it turns out saying it louder and slower repeatedly doesn't help. The locals that did actually understand what I was going on about didn't seem to know much about it or really care. Egypt clearly isn't a country full of railway enthusiasts. Almost everyone I spoke to had zero interest in it. But I did establish a few things. It was disused, it definitely did terminate at the port just south of Safaga, it definitely wasn't for passengers, it was freight and had something to do with phosphate mining. Although nobody was quite sure what happened to it after it went into the desert. Then a local told me that it was built by the British Army during the 1940s, which didn't tie into anything else that I'd heard so far and left me very confused. Obviously, the thing to do was go take a look at it. I was told that wandering around the desert on my own wasn't a good idea, not least because we were pretty close to a few military bases and I didn't fancy delivering my choo-choo impression to anyone with a gun. I think mostly in an effort to shut me up, one of the staff did some research in Arabic and offered to take me in his car to have a look at the tracks, and this is what I found. Miles and miles of modern looking concrete sleepers still sat in the ballast without any rails. And now I was pretty sure I knew what I was looking at. This was the final part of the 680-kilometre long line that was built in the 1970s and 80s that ran from the Abu Tata phosphate mines near Kaga in the west, via a city called Qena, which is on the banks of the River Nile, through the desert and terminated at the port in Safaga. And I think it's fair to say that this railway was not a success story. The construction of the line took decades. It needed to cross the mountainous desert terrain, required a new bridge over the Nile, and significant amounts of infrastructure along the route and at the port, which, as you might imagine, wasn't cheap. The project cost the Egyptian government billions. In the 1970s, the value of phosphates was high and justified the line, but during construction, the price dropped dramatically and the whole thing became financially unsound. Despite this, those in charge pressed ahead anyway, and the line was eventually put into use. The line used locomotives designed specifically for extreme temperatures with special air filters to guard against sand. They had a top speed of 80 km per hour and were used in pairs, the idea being that should one loco fail, the second one should be able to maintain progress, albeit slower, with the heavy phosphate trains. Then it's not clear when, but at some point the line stopped being used and trucks took over the phosphate traffic on the section between Qena and Safaga, but the line was left in place. However, during the January 2011 uprising, armed gangs started looting the line, cutting up the rails and selling them as scrap, which is why all that's left in most sections are just sleepers. We travelled to Qena and the line runs alongside the road for much of the journey. As you enter Qena, the rails start to reappear along with the semaphore signals, and this marks the start of the section which is still in use. So what about the person who told me the line was built by the military during the Second World War? This clearly wasn't a wartime relic, the sleepers were modern. Well, there was also a 1 metre narrow gauge line built in the early 1940s by British and New Zealand engineers between Safaga and Qena. This was built in case the Nile Delta was lost to the enemy and the forces needed to move back up the Nile and possibly evacuate via Safaga. This railway took a different route to the more modern phosphate line, but was built considerably quicker and completely taken up after the war. It's a real shame that neither of these lines are still operating today. It would be quite the journey with a collection of stunning views along the way, running alongside the peaceful Red Sea coast, weaving through the tall desert mountains before arriving in the buzzing city on the green banks of the Nile. There is talk of building a high-speed line between Hurghada, Safaga and Qena in phase 3 of the Egyptian government's ambitious plans to bring Egyptian railways into the 21st century and connect up key cities. But the current financial situation could make that difficult, and most people I spoke to didn't seem too confident that it would happen. If it does go ahead, then it won't be for a number of years yet. So there we go, that's the railway I became obsessed with on holiday, and I think that's about it for this video. Some unusual railway subject matter there, but I hope you found it interesting. If you did, then please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks to Ali for driving me into the desert and waiting whilst I inspected the sleepers. Special thanks to the members and patrons for your support, it's very much appreciated. Thanks for watching, and I will hopefully see you again soon.